Hi everyone, this is Trisha, and I'm back with another video for you using the new hot air balloons in this watercolor mini journal series that we started with the cover last time. So this time we're going to start with the inside cover and page 1. So I'm showing you here the cover that we just did, and we're just going to use that right side, which the middle is going to be glued in, so we don't need that, as you see the X there. So we're going to do that left-hand side, and we're going to do the first page, which is a fold out. So right here you see I've taped this down because, again, I don't want it to warp. I want it to stay still because I'm going to use some water, but also because I want that nice border on the top and the bottom. So I'm using this little lighthouse from the Lighthouse Set, and I'm inking it up with the 969. Then I'm going to come in with the 569, and I'm going to ink it up again right over the top so that I get that nice warm brown, almost black color. And you'll see me here, I'm going to stamp it off twice right onto my palette so that I can reuse that color. That gives me a nice light impression on my page, and you'll see me rocking. You'll be seeing me rocking this, but I'm really not pressing all that hard. So I'm not smashing this into the page. I'm just pressing it down to make sure I get a good impression. Now I'm taking my number 0 paintbrush, and I am just pulling a little bit of the color out of the lines, just using some of that color that might have been on the tape there to pull out some of the shadows. This is our first pass, so it's going to be really light. We're not going to be doing a lot of work here. So now I'm coming in with a little bit of a darker color right on the edges, on the sides of this lighthouse, and that's because it's a cylinder. So when you look at a cylinder, the highlight's always going to be somewhere in the middle, and those sides are going to be dark. I'm just pulling a little bit more color out. I pulled a little out of that house that's right next to it. And then I'm going to continue to add some color from my palette, just a little bit at a time, just to give it a little more character, a little more depth, I guess. So as you see here, I'm just loading my brush up with some of that leftover paint. And now I'm going to figure out where I want to put that little mountain in the back. What I don't want to do is I don't want to go near the lighthouse, because I want that to stay nice and crisp. So all I'm doing here is taking a little bit of that brown and just dragging my brush across and creating just a little triangle with some bumps. That's all it is, just triangles with bumps. And then I'm just filling it in with some clean water. This you could switch. It would probably be better to switch to a bigger brush because it's a bigger area. I'm going to put some more brown on my palette. And now I'm just going to drop some into that wet area, like a wet on wet type of a technique. And I'm going to continue to do that and add some more colors, some purples and some browns and some blues, just to get some variety in that mountain. I don't want it to be too dark, but you know me, I'm heavy-handed, so my stuff always starts really light and then ends up really dark. I've learned to embrace it, so it's fine. So now I'm just continuing to add some highlights and some shadows. I'm picking up some clean water to blend everything out so it doesn't look, so it looks 3D, not 3D, but more dimensional. You don't want to color it in completely. I know it looks like it's colored in completely. It's not. So at this point, I think I'm going to let that dry. And while that's drying, I'm just going to come in here and show you how I kind of plan out, before I put in the water in the sky, I need to plan out where I want these balloons, because I want to make sure I don't go over where those balloons are going to be. But I also want to make sure that it looks nice, and I'm not going to try to put them straight up and down. I'm going to try to angle some of them so they look like they're blowing in the wind. So now I'm going to ink up, I put some blue on my palette, and I'm going to start just placing a really light wash where I think I might want the water line to be. I'm not going to go straight across the page like horizontally because I think it adds more interest when you go diagonally, and I just think it looks better that way. So that's the way I decided to go, but when you do your paintings, you can do whatever you want. So I'm also adding a little bit of blue underneath the mountain there, just because I'm gonna have some reflection and stuff, and I really want that to look like it's right against that water line. So now all I'm gonna do is take my brush, add some water, add a little bit of paint, making sure that the darker area is in the back, and as it comes forward, it gets lighter and lighter. And I'm kind of staying clear of those little the little plants. Yeah, they're plants. No, they're hot air balloons. So I'm steering clear of the hot air balloons, and I'm just dragging some color underneath where they would be so that it looks like a little bit of a shadow. And then I'm just gonna slowly fill in this water area so you can see how I do water. I'm really just dragging my brush lightly across the page, so trying not to get too much paint because I want to be able to layer in some more paint on top of this. So now I'm just using some clean water to spread it all out so that I can get some good blooms going on. I find when I do water, and I do skies too, I really like when the paper blooms, and paper blooms when the part of the paper has water on it and part of it's dry. So when you're putting in water onto something that's already starting to dry, the water is going to push, and then it's going to make it wet again. So that's what creates those blooms. I happen to love them. I think they look great for clouds and waves and all of that jazz. So I tend to leave them and sometimes make them happen. But if you don't like them, you can always just take your paintbrush and massage them out, or a paper towel and pick them up. But I kind of like them, so I just leave them. And we'll do more on the water after it's dry. We'll do another layer and really start to bring out those waves. So right now I am inking up this big balloon with some brown because I'm going to do some painting into it. If you want to do brown only on the bottom, and then like I've done, I'm doing colors at the top, that's fine. You can do brown on the whole thing and then paint in between the lines. It's really up to you. I like when I stamp with the actual color. I like how it's just more vibrant to me, so I like doing that sometimes. So now I'm going to go and probably change my mind a little bit here because I wanted some of those balloons to look like they were way off in the distance. And I wanted some of them to look like they were overlapping. So here I'm going to put in this one here so it looks like it's way back there. And by putting the big one next to that little one, it gives the perspective of that one's way off in the distance. And the same with this balloon. It actually then brings back that mountain back into the background a little bit further too. So I'm going to ink up this next balloon with some red, and then I'm going to do the bottom part in the brown. I wanted to be careful what I put over that crease that's going to be glued in. I wanted it to have something on it, but I didn't want it to be important enough to get lost. So as you can see here, I'm kind of tilting it to the right a little bit just to make it look like it's kind of floating off on an angle. Those other two were way too up and down. Looking at them now, I wish I had angled those two a little bit more, but it's okay. So now, like I said, I wanted to put one kind of tucked in behind so that it looks like they're not on the same plane. One's behind a little bit, maybe off more in the distance. So that was my thinking behind this. And I'm going to put that one there, but I'm also going to put another one in, I think. I did so many of these now, I'm trying to remember what I did. I should probably look at it and see what I did. So I guess that's all I'm gonna, the other one, the ones behind must be in another video. So right now I'm just going in now that everything's good and dry, and I'm adding another layer. So as you can see, it's still pretty light, and I'm not going over everything. I'm just going over a few things in the background here, and I'm trying to avoid those balloons as much as possible. Even though I just hit that there, it's okay. A little bit of brown is fine in the water. Those little mistakes don't bother me. They're happy accidents as far as I'm concerned. They just make it look more and more like a watercolor painting. So again, putting a little shadow under that one in the back. Now I'm going to take my brush and just create some of those dark areas underneath the waves. So where the white foam is, right underneath the crest of that wave is going to be really, really dark. So I'm trying to use what hard edges are there to pull out some of those waves, just to get a little bit of variety. But this is the most unstressful. This, you should be playing with this. You should be having fun with this. This should not be stressful at all, because waves and skies, they can be anything. They can look any way. There's no perfect any way to do either of them because they're so different in nature anyways. So it's the most freeing because you can just do anything, and it could possibly look like water, or could possibly look like a sky. So this should be a really fun exercise when you get to this part. This is always my most enjoyable part of the whole painting process. Just being able to say, oh, where do I want these little waves coming in? And do I want this to look like it's a cresting wave, or is it one of those waves that's more near the shore and it's not such a high wave? Those are all just things that I think are fun to explore with your watercolors. I was glad I had kind of put the balloons off-centered, because after I started doing the water and it started looking like it was more choppy and windy, it kind of made me feel like the balloons were kind of getting tousled out there in the water, which I really liked. Every painting that I do with art impressions really makes me feel like I'm doing something different every time, and even though I might like the way this looks, I do it again and it looks totally different. It's so much fun, and so it just really brings out your creative juices, or mine anyway. Okay, so now that little area at the bottom, I'm just trying to pull a little bit out of the bottom of that balloon so that it just gives it a little more depth and looks a little more 3D. And make sure you're not crossing those lines that Bonnie drew for you, because those are the lines that you want to create your highlights within each of those sections. It's going to make your projects really pop. So now I'm pulling just a little bit more out, some brown out of those little weights in the bottom. And then I'll let that dry, and I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to pull the brown out of each of these little baskets as my first layer. I'll come in and add some more brown to them, but for right now, it's a first layer. Now I'm going to add a little bit more to the wet so that it just kind of bleeds in and gives a nice highlight. So here I'm cleaning up my brush because it's really little, and when you put water on it with these little tiny balloons, it doesn't take much to have just a drop and ruin your little image. So just make sure it's damp but not wet. And then I'm just pulling the color right out of the lines into those balloons. These are going to be really fun. You can decorate these in so many ways. You can put dots on them or stripes on them, or any kind of anything you can do with these to make them different. You can Google hot air balloons and get some really good ideas on how to color them and how to make them beautiful. I was so excited when Bonnie came out with these little hot air balloons because they're so much fun. They're just so much fun. And I'm just adding the colors to each one of these balloons. The little highlight in the middle, I'm trying to make lighter so that each one looks like it's a little more 3D. So make sure you're leaving enough white space so that you get that look. So now I'm going to finish up, add a little bit more highlights to this little one here. And then I'm going to paint those other two, and then we'll finish up the lighthouse and add some details. So I'm literally just pulling that color right down off that tape because I wanted it to be a little bit light to start. This is such a pretty pink little balloon here. I like the decorations, the little flag decorations. They're so cool. I'm going to speed this up now because you don't really need me. I've already colored 3 of these little balloons, so I'm not really sure you need to watch me meticulously color each one of these. So I'm going to speed this up a little, and then I'll come back and we'll do the lighthouse. Okay, so now that we have the balloons all done, let's start with this lighthouse. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to start by shading the right-hand side of the roof of this lighthouse with the red. This is 856. Now I'm just adding additional red to the little outbuilding next to it. I'm going to add a little bit more red because it was a little light. And now I'm going to proceed to put a little more dark color on the right-hand side, still leaving a little highlight on the left. And then I'm going to rinse my brush really well and start adding some color to the lighthouse itself. I'm using some purples, some blues, some browns, just to kind of give it an old white, not broken down, but just a weathered look, and to also give it a little dimension. So I'm adding some dark purple and blue mixture to the sides and underneath that, the roof line of that little outbuilding, and then underneath where those, where the top is. So as you can see here, this is a lot of blue. Like, oh, that was a lot of blue. So I'm just taking a wet brush and adding some water, and now I take the water out of the brush so it's dry, and then I just soak up some of that color. And by putting the water on first, it just lightens it up so that you can pull the color out easier, so it stains the paper less. And again, I'm just pulling some of that color up and then taking some more clean water and just pulling some more color off, and a thirsty brush just to soak it right up. And that just gives it a nice little, I'm going to add a little bit of brown to the side just to give it a little more of a darker highlight or shadow on the right hand side next to that building. And on the top of the roof, I guess. It's all about shadows and highlights. That's how you get dimension in your work. I'm just going to blend this out a little bit because it looked a little weird. Again, thirsty brush. Just blending out those edges. I didn't want it to really blend in with the background because of the water, so I added a little more brown just to make sure that it was a different color than the water. And then I'll just add some additional color right along those edges, those really, really dark areas, just to make it pop a little bit more. So now we're gonna work on the sky. And the sky, again, don't stress about this, it's so easy. With these little balloons, if you try to do, you don't want to surround the balloon completely, so you want to pick like two sides, like a diagonal, a little bit on the left, a little bit on the right, or across, so that there's a little bit on each side. It just gives it so much more interest, I guess. And then just move your brush around. You can see here how much water I have on my brush and how much I'm putting down on the page. That's going to allow me to pick up some of that water before it dries, so I don't get some hard edges. And then I do want some hard edges. But this is really just make shapes. Just push stuff around, make shapes. It's so much fun to do clouds and water. It's not intimidating at all. Put on some music or a book or something, and then just play around with creating clouds. It's so much fun. So as you can see here, I did some big clouds in the front, and now I'm putting some really small ones that are kind of clustered together at the bottom. That's just going to give the reader or the viewer the feeling that they're looking at something off in the distance. So things get smaller as they get away from you. So your clouds are going to get smaller, your boats are going to get smaller, your hot air balloons are smaller in the distance. So I'm just kind of putting in just a few literally marks on the page with some really light paint, because you don't want those clouds to be really dark. You want them to be lighter than the ones that are up in the foreground. So now what I'm doing here is I'm just taking my brush and I'm kind of using a thirsty brush to pull up some of those hard edges on those big ones in those big clouds. And you'll see I'll do that a few times. And all I'm doing is taking a paper towel, cleaning off everything off my brush, and using that dry brush to pull up some of that color and some of that water. So it leaves that really nice pillowy effect, if you will, to your clouds. It softens them up so much nicer. It makes them look really ethereal. I'm going to say ethereal. And if you want, you can always add more color. You can add like gray at the bottoms. Look at clouds. See how they look in the sky. There's plenty of inspiration out there for clouds, but you literally can't do them wrong, because they're clouds and there's just so many varieties. So you should never be intimidated by that. So now I'm going back in again to my water, and I'm just adding some really dark color to right underneath these balloons. And then I'm going to start just putting some more color underneath the waves. And I think I'm showing you there that I'm picking up some really dark color here, and I'm going to go in and just literally drag my brush across where I think a wave would be, or I think a crest is going to be. So again, you don't need, I'm going to go through this, I'm going to show you what I do in real time, but you don't really need me to talk through this. So just kind of watch the process and I'll be back with you. Okay, so now we've finished the waves and the water. So we're going to go back in here, and I am now looking at my sky like, oh, I don't like how maybe some of these hard edges look. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking some water on my brush, on a clean water on a clean brush, and I'm just putting some water down, and then I'm kind of scrubbing at that edge. Try to pull it up, try to soften it as much as possible. If I can't do that, sometimes I'll just add a little more color. I didn't want to do that here, or I guess I did. Nope, I didn't want to do that here because it wasn't that big of a deal. I kind of just left it. And then I'm adding some more browns and purple mixtures with some blues into that, that mountainside on the right, just to give it a little more interest, make it look like it's got some texture to it. And this is just really quick, doesn't need to be much. And once you have all that water laid down, you can just drop in color, which makes it look really cool. The bottom of that mountain should be darker than the top. Now we're just letting that dry, and we're gonna come over here now that this water is all dried up. And I'm using some gouache that I watered down, but you can also use some bleed-proof white mixed with water. I use some gouache mixed with water. Either one will work. I'm just really trying to bring back some of those white highlights along the water, the spray of the water. Is that what it is? I don't know. The white foamy stuff. So as I go in, I'll go in, grab some more white. If you want it even whiter, I would just use less water. I just really wanted to kind of bring some of those highlights back, but I didn't want them to be really stark because I didn't want to take away from the balloons. So, yep, just making a few more adjustments, getting some more highlights in here. Yeah, like that's a really nice consistency right there where you can see the foam, and it just makes that wave look like a wave even more. And what I'm just dabbing, just putting some paint on my brush, and then I'm just dabbing it here and there, jumping my brush around in no particular pattern. Actually, you want to do it so there is no pattern, so it doesn't look funky. This is nature. Nature is imperfect and beautiful, and that's how your painting should be, just perfectly imperfect, as Shada would say. Now I'm just enhancing a couple more of these waves. So as you can see, it's now starting to come together. You can see some of that that water now looks like it's very windy out, and those balloons would be kind of floating off in the distance at an angle. And now I'm just adding a few more highlights here at the beginning or next to that lighthouse, because maybe as it comes down, it's starting to calm down as it gets closer to the shore. Who knows? You can continue to add and add until you're happy with it. I tend to sometimes get a little carried away, and other times I don't. I just let it go. So this one I was enjoying the process, so I think I was just listening to music and then just painting. So I did get my head stuck in there a couple of times. Luckily I edited most of it out. And then this is just a little bit more white to enhance those waves. That is great. That white is great too. If you have an area which you don't like, you can kind of try to fix it using the white, especially if it's a darker color and you need to kind of go over it with a different color. You can use the white as a mask, kind of. So now I'm just pulling some lines down to make it look like that wave is kind of coming up and cresting, while this one over here is a little less aggressive. And now that that mountain in the back is dried, I'm just going to put some more brown and purples in there just to give it a little more texture, because it looked like it was a little flat. And as things dry, you might have to come back in here several layers. I think layers are awesome because they give such character and they just look so cool. Whereas if you just did one flat wash, it has no depth, it has no texture in it, and I just really like the way it looks when you have all these different colors and textures in them. So I'm just enhancing that a little bit more. I'll pull some of that color right out into the water itself, so it's really dark at that base of that mountain. And sometimes in order to get a really dark hue, you need to layer, so you can keep going in and adding another layer of color, which makes it a little more dark. So I'm just kind of pushing that color around. Give it a little character, couldn't say character more, I think. But this is pretty much it. It's pretty much done. So I hope you have enjoyed spending a little time with me creating this little watercolor journal. I hope you'll come back for the next installments. And if you want to subscribe, click the button. There's some more videos here if you want to see some more. I hope you have a great day, and thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day.